My wife's godson died on my operating table. He was also the only child of her first love. Her first love threw punches and kicks at me, but my wife didn't stop him, because I knew she would hit me even harder. She contacted the Medical Malpractice Appraisal Center right in front of me, threatening to sue me, accusing me of settling a personal score and killing her godson. On the day the appraisal results came out, she collapsed into my arms, crying uncontrollably and begging for my forgiveness. But I pushed her away and handed her a divorce agreement. The story is about to begin. If you like it, remember to like and subscribe. My surgical patient died despite all efforts to save him. I walked out of the operating room, filled with sorrow, only to be slammed against the wall by my wife. The heavy thud of my head and back hitting the wall left me dazed and falling to the floor. But my wife didn't care at all, just screaming at me, "Why didn't you save Mark?" Assistant physician Chloe quickly helped me up and gently explained, "Mrs. Sophia, Dr. James did his best." My wife's first love, David, immediately rushed to me. His eyes bloodshot, he grabbed my surgical gown tightly and demanded, "Did you deliberately not save my son?" I shook my head, trying to explain, "Mr. David, I did my best. If you don't believe me, ask my wife." Mark was brought to the hospital by Sophia after the car accident, but it was already too late. Mark had a ruptured spleen and massive internal bleeding. I knew my wife had always treated Mark like her own child, and she had repeatedly begged me to save him. So I could understand that she couldn't accept Mark's death at the moment. I thought she would calm down and explain for me, but instead, she slapped me hard. "James, you've disappointed me so much. Our own child isn't even born yet, just a tiny embryo, but Mark was a living person. How could you settle a score and kill him?" Chloe looked at Sophia in shock, her face filled with confusion and disbelief. "Mrs. Sophia, how could you?" Seeing David about to hit me, Chloe hurriedly blocked him. "Mr. David, please calm down. We really did our best." But David didn't believe it, and Sophia looked at me like I was a criminal, her eyes full of disappointment. Mark's young life faded away before my eyes, and my sorrow was no less than theirs. The frustration of the failed surgery left me exhausted, but it was nothing compared to the hurt I felt from Sophia's doubts. I didn't want to argue with her and walked away, but she suddenly grabbed my wrist. "James, your silence means you admit it, right?" Her usually delicate hand was surprisingly strong today, and my sore wrist from the long surgery ached from her grip. I looked at her and said helplessly, "I have no regrets about this surgery. You know the condition of the child when he was brought in better than I do." But Sophia seemed not to understand my explanation and continued to press, "Stop making excuses. With your superb medical skills, how could you not save him? You deliberately killed him. Where there's a will to accuse, there's a way to find fault." The medical staff who were in the same operating room were all shocked into silence. She was my wife and a lawyer, and without any evidence, she actually questioned my integrity and medical ethics for the sake of her first love's child. I forcefully pried her hand off and stared at her distorted, ferocious face. "Sophia, do you know what you're saying?" I held back my anger and grievance, my clenched fists trembling uncontrollably. But Sophia, like an enraged lion, lunged at me and started pounding and scratching me desperately. "Why did you have to kill Mark? David has already lost his wife. Why did you have to take away his only remaining family?" Her sharp nails left several bloody scratches on my face. Seeing me letting Sophia make a scene, David's eyes gleamed with a sinister light, and soon his fists rained down on me. "Even your own wife doesn't believe you. How dare you say it wasn't intentional? You murderer, you will pay for my son's life." For a moment, I couldn't tell whether the pain in my body or the pain in my heart was worse. The nurse immediately called security for me. After David was restrained by security, he still kicked me. I dodged and tightly grabbed Sophia's hands that were trying to scratch me again. My wife, who usually acted like a lady, now looked just like a street brawler. Her usually well-groomed hair was disheveled, falling messily around her face, and her cheeks were flushed and sweaty. "James, you wait. I'm going to sue you and get justice for Mark." I let go of her hands in frustration, and she immediately contacted the Medical Malpractice Appraisal Center right in front of me. Hearing Sophia on the phone, David struggled to break free from the security guard's control. "Sophia, stop making a fuss. Mark is already dead. I don't want him to suffer anymore." With that, he covered his face and wept silently. I looked at his poor acting with disdain, but Sophia believed him. "I don't believe Mark would just die like that. I have to get justice for him." She considerately lent her shoulder to David to lean on, leaving me only with cold eyes and anger and disappointment. I stared at the close contact between her and David, feeling a dense pain in my heart. Back in my office, I lay weakly on the folding bed. Why was the light from the fluorescent lamp so glaring? It hurt my eyes as if something was about to burst out. Men don't cry, even if they bleed. I held on for a long time, but tears still silently slid down. The tears flowed over the wounds, hurting so much that I dared not even cry out loud. Mark was just David's child with his deceased wife. Sophia's outrageous behavior made it seem as if Mark was her own son, which was really ridiculous. Did she think about my situation when she was causing trouble? As a lawyer, she had always pursued justice. As a doctor, would I lose my basic professional ethics just because Mark was David's son? Dr. James, take care of your wounds. It's hot, and you don't want them to get infected. Chloe handed me a bottle of iodine. It was only when I looked in the mirror that I realized my face had been scratched by Sophia. The bloodstains where she had scratched me were striking, and every time the cotton swab touched the wounds, the burning pain became more and more intense. Dr. James, is that man related to your wife? Is she really going to sue? My hand paused, feeling quite helpless. He is her first love. Whether she will sue or not is really hard to say. Ah, well, then you should have a good talk with them. If she really sues, it will be very troublesome. If you are in the right, you have nothing to fear. I rubbed my aching temples and thought to myself that if she really sues, our marital affection would be over. Chloe hesitated to speak, but finally persuaded me. The doctor-patient relationship is already very sensitive nowadays. If it really goes to court, it will be bad for both you and the hospital. Why don't you coax your wife? If she can mediate and calm the family members down, the misunderstanding can be cleared up. How could I not know what Chloe was saying? But with Sophia, an elite lawyer, leading the medical troublemaking, just threatening to sue was enough to give me a headache. Words can be very powerful, and she was very clear about the consequences of suing. Asking me to coax Sophia over this matter was an insult to my feelings and career. Even if I tried, I couldn't stop her if she was determined to do it. Moreover, David was clearly just causing trouble on purpose, and there was no misunderstanding to speak of. Dragging my tired body back home, Sophia was indeed not there. Lying in bed, I repeatedly recalled the surgical process, reflecting on my decisions and abilities. Did I really not have a hint of selfishness? As soon as this thought came to my mind, I was so shocked that I broke into a cold sweat. I slapped myself hard a few times. James, stay awake. At that moment, David sent me a video. Dr. James, you are not worthy of being a doctor. If I were you, I would be so ashamed that I would commit suicide. It turned out that the morning's medical troublemaking had gone viral. Netizens who were unaware of the full story were furious that a child had died because a doctor had deliberately neglected his duty, especially mothers, who couldn't stand such a thing. They united to forward the video and strongly condemned me. David, seeing the increasing attention, specifically registered a new account and, as a grown man, tearfully lamented his loss of wife and child. As he cried with his face covered, the scars of attempted suicide on his wrist were inadvertently revealed, which aroused the netizens' sympathy. He never mentioned that I was at fault, but every word he said guided the netizens to become a sharp blade in his hand, stabbing at me. Even though the hospital's official explanation and apology were issued, the netizens were not convinced. In just one day, I became a murderer that everyone condemned. Sophia stayed out all night, not answering her phone or replying to messages. She coldly watched as I and the hospital were in a difficult situation, without defending me even once. She even posted a photo of a lawsuit in David's comments section, with the caption "Condolences, I will get justice for you." I understood that she was serious. I spent the whole night without sleep because David sent me another photo. In it, Sophia was lying on the sofa, fast asleep, and David was intimately taking a photo with her from behind. The extremely vulgar posture made me feel sick. Sophia was tired and stayed at my place tonight. David emphasized the word tired in his voice message, with no hint of the pain of losing his child. Dr. James, after careful consideration, if you publicly apologize, I will persuade Sophia to drop the lawsuit. You know she is still the same as before, stubborn when it comes to my matters. Full of provocation and arrogance, he wanted me to apologize for something that never happened. Dream on. Let Sophia make a fuss if she wants, I don't care. I certainly don't need David to persuade her to drop the lawsuit for me. For me, it is an utmost humiliation. Anyway, in Sophia's eyes, David would have the upper hand as soon as he made an appearance. The next day, the dean talked to me. James, you should resolve the issue between husband and wife behind closed doors. You should go and talk to the deceased's family and clear up the misunderstanding. I replied with a face full of helplessness. Dean, I am not afraid of an investigation. The autopsy will prove my innocence. The main problem is that they are convinced that I deliberately neglected my duty. To prevent David from changing his mind halfway, I have also contacted the Medical Malpractice Appraisal Center. It all depends on which side the balance of justice will tilt towards. The dean side, James, because of your wife's involvement, the nature of this matter has changed. Do you understand? It is normal for the family to be unable to accept the fact and to be emotionally extreme. As doctors, we have the duty to comfort and eliminate misunderstandings, and your wife is the key in this. I gave a bitter smile. All right, I understand. I found Sophia at David's house. She glanced worriedly at David before coming downstairs with me. I grabbed her and pleaded, "What do I have to do for you to believe that I had no ulterior motives? Shall I ask the dean to get the surgical records for you? Those can't be faked, can they?" She countered, "James, what are you afraid of? Or are you feeling guilty?" Guilty? I was not giving up and, with red eyes, I begged her pitifully, "Come home with me, okay? If she comes with me, I can take her to the hospital to see the surgical records, and I can give her a detailed account of the entire resuscitation process and my doubts." But she coldly replied, "David has not been in good shape these past few days. If anything happens to him, that would be a disaster for you. Before the results are out, we should not have too much contact, otherwise it would be unfair to my client." Under the guise of doing something for my own good, she was going to accompany another man in a very proper manner. I took out my phone and pointed to the photo David had sent me, questioning her, "Is this how you are accompanying him?" Seeing the intimate photo, Sophia's brows furrowed in displeasure before relaxing again. "He just didn't want you to worry about me. Don't overthink it. We are innocent. And he did try to persuade me not to have a falling out with you. It was me who insisted on filing a lawsuit for Mark." I couldn't understand her logic. Why? Sophia pinched her temples irritably. "You wouldn't understand. People with depression can sometimes be very stubborn and sometimes they say one thing but mean another. At this critical moment, don't provoke him. Even a small thing could be the last straw." I was stunned. Was I supposed to compromise for this unfounded accusation? What did David's misfortune of losing his wife and child have to do with me? Why should I pay with my happy life? Although Sophia's face had shown embarrassment and anger after hearing David's sarcastic voice message, she still chose to defend David and then left resolutely. 3 days later, Sophia was waiting for me in the dean's office with David. Upon seeing me arrive, the dean once again suggested, "James, apologize to Mr. David, and then we can sit down and talk things through slowly." I clung to the last glimmer of hope and pulled Sophia aside. "I have examined my conscience and found no selfishness. Why won't you trust me? Surgery always carries risks. I am not a god." She looked haggard, touching her lower abdomen coldly and saying, "You had a motive. Our unborn child became the reason for me to kill." I gave a bitter smile. "Why would you humiliate me so?" David stood with his arms crossed, watching the drama unfold with an air of nonchalance, while Sophia wouldn't even spare me a glance. The awkward silence was unbearable, as everyone waited for me to apologize. Seeing that I remained unmoved, the dean had no choice but to bow 90 degrees to the two of them. "Mr. David, Mrs. Sophia, I am deeply sorry about this matter." My eyes instantly turned red. I quickly helped the dean up and glared at Sophia. "Do you have to make such a scene?" She finally looked at me, but her eyes were so cold that they made me feel as if I were in an ice cellar. "An apology is just a formality. What we need is the truth." Was she speaking from the perspective of a representative or from the standpoint of David's family? Enough was enough. I felt utterly disheartened and said nothing more. She left a lawyer's letter and took David away. To avoid any suspicion, she personally organized the materials and had her capable assistant file the lawsuit for David. So this is what it feels like to have a steel needle pierce through the heart, a pain that cuts deep into the soul. The dean sat down powerlessly and sighed deeply as he watched their backs. The corridor was filled with colleagues who were there to gawk. Amidst their gossip and condemnation, I felt as if I had been stripped bare and fled in disgrace. Suspended from my duties for investigation, I had to stay at home to avoid the online exposure and doxing. But I wasn't idle. Before the results came out, I had someone conduct a thorough investigation. A month later, the investigation results and the medical malpractice appraisal results came out one after another. After receiving the appraisal results, Sophia finally decided to come home. However, she hesitated at the door, unable to bring herself to enter for a long time. When our eyes met, the girl whom I had cherished and nurtured with love, once as beautiful as a rose, now looked haggard and lifeless. After a long while, she burst into tears and threw herself into my arms. "Honey, I was wrong. Will you forgive me?" What did she want me to forgive her for? For her inappropriate relationship with David? For letting our child die in the womb because of someone else's son? For baselessly slandering and insulting me? For watching me be exposed online, doxed, and still kicking me while I was down? A dull pain struck my chest. I pushed her away mercilessly and handed her a divorce agreement. Without even looking at it, she tore it to shreds and cried uncontrollably, "Honey, don't divorce. I don't want to divorce. The last time she cried like this seemed to be when David broke up with her. No, this was the most intense she had ever cried since I fell in love with her. I instinctively raised my hand to comfort her. Seeing my gesture, her eyes filled with hope, eagerly waiting for me to embrace her. But I clenched my fist, and my hand fell mercilessly. The light in her eyes instantly went out. She pouted, looking like an abandoned stray cat. I took a step back, and she took a step forward. I was pushed against the wall by her. She hugged my waist tightly, her face pressed against my chest, crying so hard that she could barely breathe, yet still trying to hold on. James, I'm sorry. James, I'm really sorry. Can you stop being angry with me? James, give me another chance, okay? Didn't we say we would have a baby after this was over? She looked at me sincerely, as if her eyes could only see me. In the past, I would have given my life for that look. But I couldn't forget that before today, her eyes and heart were only filled with David. When she accused me of deliberately not saving Mark, the James who loved her with all his heart was dead. She stood on her tiptoes to kiss me, her cold tears covering my face, yet not as cold as my broken heart. I pushed her away again. She struggled and acted spoiled, accidentally knocking the wedding photo off the wall. It fell to the ground and shattered into pieces, just like our marriage. She staggered back like a child who had done something wrong, looking at me with her tear-stained face, at a loss. Then, as if she remembered something, she rummaged through things frantically. She took out glue and knelt on the ground, like a believer, trying very hard to piece together the broken glass that could never be restored. Even though the glass shards pricked her hands and made them bleed, she seemed oblivious. The blood stained the glass fragments red. I kicked the wedding photo aside in a fit of anger. Sophia, enough. If you knew it would end like this, why did you do it in the first place? Our marriage is over. She trembled with her blood-stained hands, pitifully begging me, James, can't you comfort me? I'm in so much pain, my hand hurts, and my heart hurts. I was innocent with him. I didn't do anything to betray you. I just couldn't let go of the past, and he was indeed pitiable. I worked overtime day and night just to close his case sooner. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. I knew Sophia had not physically cheated, she had her principles, but what about her heart? When you like someone, even if you don't say it with words, your eyes will reveal it. I was all too familiar with the look of compassion she had when she looked at David. From that moment on, her heart had unconsciously tilted towards David. Sophia, I believe you, but I don't want a heart that wavers. Since you can't let go of the past, why not face your feelings and reconcile with him? He's single anyway. Sophia shook her head frantically. James, don't you love me anymore? Otherwise, why would you divorce me over such a trivial matter? So in her mind, these were just trivial matters. The heartache had lasted too long, and at this moment, I could ask her calmly, if you could turn back time, would you still get involved with them? I looked at her for the last time with a gentle gaze, full of longing and bitterness. I thought to myself that if she said no, I would give her one last chance. I knew I shouldn't feel sorry for her, but I couldn't help but soften my heart. Just at that moment, Sophia's phone rang. It was David. Sophia took a deep breath and cut off the call, but the phone kept ringing persistently. Sophia looked at me for help, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. My eyes grew colder by the second. If you want to answer, go ahead. Don't blame me if something happens later. Sophia felt relieved and immediately answered the call. What? Okay, I'm on my way. Her face was filled with anxiety and panic. James, David attempted suicide by jumping off a building. He's being resuscitated in the hospital now. I'll be back soon. Wait for me at home. I watched her leave in a hurry, my heart turning to ashes. Whether she would come back home or not didn't matter anymore because there was no home left. I should have seen this ending coming. Sophia and I had been married for 3 years, but in reality, I had loved her for nearly a decade. When I had a crush on her, she was hopelessly in love with David, following him around like a lovesick puppy. After she finally won him over, Sophia had a car accident that left her facing the possibility of paralysis. Without a word, David moved on and married someone else. Sophia was devastated and refused to cooperate with her treatment. It was I who gave up further studies and stayed by her side day and night, helping her with her rehabilitation. When she was finally able to stand again, David's son was born. She would get drunk every night, and I would wait for her outside the bar, taking her home when she was intoxicated, undressing her and cooking sobering soup to take care of her. I comforted and accompanied her without expecting anything in return. On another drunken night, Sophia grabbed me as I was leaving. Don't go. She leaned in to kiss me, but I dodged and looked straight into her eyes. Sophia, who am I? James, I recognize you. I didn't dodge anymore. That night, Sophia gave it her all with me. The next morning, she woke up in my arms, as gentle as a little kitten. It was the scene I had always dreamed of. In the morning, with sunlight and Sophia, time and love were not wasted. After we confirmed our relationship, we naturally started dating and got married. I thought I had finally seen the light at the end of the tunnel until David, who had become depressed after his wife's death from illness, got back in touch with Sophia. A photo of him cutting his wrist made Sophia cry with heartache. I understood David's pain of losing his wife and his desperate plea for help when he was in depression. So when David asked Sophia to help him with a property dispute case, I had no objections. In order to help David reclaim his late wife's property, Sophia was extremely busy. Whenever I showed a bit of irritation, she would wrap her arms around my neck and act coquettish. "Honey, I'll definitely spend quality time with you once I'm done. And then we'll have a baby." Every time, I believed her words without a doubt. Until she pulled all-nighters at the law firm for David's case. I couldn't help but chide her. "Honey, he's just your client, not your husband, and you're not his son's mother." Sophia, rubbing her temples impatiently, replied, "Honey, can you stop making a fuss? I'm already exhausted. I just feel bad for him. How could this not be jealousy? If she didn't like me mentioning David and his son, couldn't I just keep quiet?" But it seemed that wasn't enough. She was not only busy with the case but also helping David take care of his feverish son, to the point where she didn't even realize she was pregnant. Exhausted from being infected with the flu by Mark, our first child was lost without any illness. She wouldn't even take proper rest after the miscarriage and continued to run around for David. I lost my temper with her for the first time, scolding her for not knowing her priorities and boundaries. The unborn child became a thorn in my heart, a thorn that became the reason she sued me for not saving Mark, and it also drove her further away from me. Our 3 years of relationship meant nothing compared to David. The appraisal results proved my innocence, but David's suicide attempt put me back in the firing line. I went from being a murderer to a homewrecker. People who didn't know the whole story advised me to let go, saying that the one who is not loved is the third wheel. I just found it absurd and laughable. Looking at the documents in my hand, I gave Sophia a call for the last time. "Out of consideration for our past as husband and wife, David is just using you. Stay away from him if you don't want to ruin your reputation." Sophia hesitated for a moment. "Honey, I'll wait until his emotions stabilize." I hung up the phone with a click. Good advice is hard to take for those who are determined to make a mistake. If she wanted to jump into the fire, that was her choice. I took the evidence to David's brother-in-law, Robert. The man glanced at me disdainfully. "Dr. James, if you can't win back your wife, why are you coming to me?" I knew he looked down on me. A man who couldn't keep his wife was indeed useless. "Don't you want to know how your sister and nephew died?" Robert's body froze as he was about to close the door. He breathed heavily. "What do you mean?" "Literal meaning. I think you understand." Robert put away his contempt and ushered me into the house. Without saying more, I handed him the documents. Robert's hands trembled as he read through all the materials, his eyes bloodshot with anger. "So it was that bastard who killed my sister and nephew." When David repeatedly refused the professional psychologists I recommended, I became suspicious. Logically, if he truly had a deep love for his late wife, no matter how hard it was to accept the blow, a normal person wouldn't neglect their child. If he really had depression, he would actively seek treatment. Mark was the product of their love, yet David didn't seem to care much about him, instead focusing all his attention on Sophia, to the point where Sophia cared for and loved Mark more than his own father. Mark had become a tool for David to gain Sophia's concern and emotional value. My doubts reached their peak when Mark died. The amount of bleeding in Mark's abdominal cavity clearly did not match the situation of being immediately brought in for resuscitation after a car accident. Even if David hadn't caused trouble, I would have called the police to thoroughly investigate the matter. I strongly suspected that Mark had already suffered a severe blow to his abdomen before the accident. For this reason, I asked a friend to review the surveillance footage from when Mark had the accident. Unfortunately, the camera only captured the moment Mark was hit and sent flying. Soon after, Sophia and David appeared in a panic. I didn't suspect Sophia of tampering with anything because she genuinely treated Mark like her own son. After Mark's death, David focused all his anger on me, without mentioning the hit-and-run driver at all. The data showed that Mark was hit by a car that had slipped while parked by the roadside. Coincidentally, it was an unlicensed vehicle, and the original owner had already passed away. I watched the surveillance video many times over. The angle and force of the impact should not have caused such severe injuries to Mark. Too many coincidences could only mean it was a meticulously orchestrated plan. My first thought was David. Initially, when David showed little interest in his son, I warned Sophia that something was off. "Honey, does David really have depression?" If he truly loved his wife, he shouldn't be constantly threatening suicide, even considering their child. But she always excused him, saying he was a depression patient. She said, "How can you think like that? David does care about Mark, he's just overwhelmed. Besides, Mark is already 7 years old, he should understand." I visited Mark's teachers and got a shocking result. The teachers strongly suspected that Mark had depression and sleepwalking, but David denied it. Several times during nap time, Mark would sleepwalk out of the classroom, calling out "Mommy, Mommy." When Sophia picked Mark up from school a few times, he was extremely averse to her, even hiding in the restroom to avoid leaving school. Some classmates had heard Mark muttering in the restroom, "I don't want that bad woman to be my mom, she killed my mom." The bad woman he referred to was Sophia. Mark's mother, Mia, had a congenital heart disease. Before her death, Sophia and I were very close, and she had completely cut ties with David. So why did Mark say that Sophia had killed his mother? Mark was already dead, but the body speaks. The autopsy report confirmed my suspicion. Mark had already suffered a severe blow before the accident. The out-of-control car only broke his ribs and worsened his condition. What's more terrifying is that a large amount of fluoxetine was found in Mark's organs, a drug that only depression patients need to take. In other words, even if Mark hadn't been hit by the car, he would have died from an overdose of the medication. As the saying goes, even a tiger doesn't eat its own cub. I also began to suspect the cause of David's wife's death. But Mia had already been buried, and that was the extent of the information I could gather. This was also the reason I sought out Robert. Initially, Robert also thought that Mia had died of a sudden illness. He didn't expect that his sister's death was suspicious until David always prevented Robert from seeing Mark. Robert then tested David, using the excuse that David was not good at managing things to take over Mia's estate on her behalf. Sure enough, David refused. This further convinced Robert that David was up to something. Sophia was well known in property disputes, so David pretended to be deeply in love and used a photo of himself attempting suicide to get to Sophia. Little did he know that it was Mark who truly suffered from depression. So David faked his own depression and gave his son antidepressants because he couldn't let Robert know that Mark had depression. But Robert was persistent about holding onto the shares and always wanted to take Mark away, which completely panicked David. Why didn't you expose David when you knew he was problematic? Looking at the dates on the investigation materials, Robert expressed his confusion. I smiled without answering. Clearly, before the appraisal results came out, if I had handed over this evidence to the police, I could have proven my innocence. But considering that Sophia was deceived and I didn't want her to be involved in this murder case, which would ruin her career and reputation, this was the last thing I could do for her before our divorce. Unfortunately, she was blind to the truth, and everyone must pay the price for their choices. What exactly caused Mia's death was no longer my concern. After handing over the materials to Robert, I left. How Robert would use the information was no longer my business. But I knew David's suicide attempt this time had ulterior motives. Once my innocence was proven, the netizens who had once cursed and insulted me were silenced. Frustrated and embarrassed that they had lost their target, they naturally turned to blame David for manipulating public opinion. So his live broadcast of the suicide attempt was, on one hand, to gain sympathy from the public to clear his name, and on the other hand, to deceive Sophia so that she would continue to defend him. Because David didn't expect the autopsy to be so detailed that it would reveal the true cause of Mark's death. But this didn't stop him from gloating over his so-called victory with me. In the video he sent me, he was lying in bed, pitifully complaining to Sophia, "Sophia, it's all my fault. I neglected Mark's psychological condition. I didn't expect him to have depression at such a young age. I didn't know he had taken my pills." What a lame excuse. Even after Mark's death, he still tried to shift the blame onto his son. How shameless. And Sophia, of course, believed him. She comforted David, "The deceased are gone, David. You should look forward, and everything will get better." David held her hand, his face full of deep emotion. "Sophia, you will always be with me, won't you?" Sophia looked pained, and finally, she nodded slightly. "I will do my best to prove your innocence to the police." For some reason, when Sophia said this, her tone was extremely strange, but I didn't think much of it. Because at that moment, my heart was dead, with no possibility of reigniting. Sophia didn't come home until 3 days later. I stood at the door, coldly watching her, and once again handed her the divorce agreement. "Let's divorce. If you don't agree, I'll have no choice but to file a lawsuit." Sophia looked at me in astonishment, expressing her confusion. Have we really come to this point? David was just my client. I won't defend him anymore in the future. I shook my head. It's over between us. Sophia's eyes reddened as she refused to sign, and after a long silence, she said, "It was me who caused Mia's death. I just wanted to make up for my mistake. I don't know how it turned out like this." At that moment, I felt as if my blood was flowing backward. Looking at Sophia, I felt she was a stranger to me. "You say it was you who killed Mia?" Anger overwhelmed me, and I roared furiously, "Then why didn't you tell me? Did you know all along that David had beaten his son? How could you cover up the true cause of Mark's death for David and accuse me of deliberately not saving Mark? I can accept that Sophia doesn't love me, but I can't accept that she deliberately framed me." Sophia clutched her dress tightly. "If I say I only found out from the appraisal results, would you believe me?" I thought it was absurd and shook my head helplessly. "Sophia, what makes you think I would believe you? You all insisted that I deliberately killed Mark. Didn't you find it strange that David didn't agree to an autopsy? Or have you loved him so much that you blindly trust him?" Sophia hugged her head and squatted on the ground, crying uncontrollably. "He said he didn't mean to hit Mark. He just lost control of his emotions. He didn't know Mark had taken the pills. He was so regretful and blamed himself that he attempted suicide. How could I just stand by and watch their whole family perish? But I never expected that he was deceiving me, using me." The last few words, Sophia shouted. The taste of betrayal, she had experienced it too. "James, I regret it. There is always something detestable about a pitiable person." I slowly reminded her, "When you were paralyzed, he could abandon you without a word and marry someone else. What is so worthy about him that you would give him your all?" In response to my question, she choked and recounted her meeting with Mia. Mia had discovered that David was having an affair, but after investigating every clue, the mistress always pointed to Sophia. Mia, under the pretext of consulting on a case, arranged to meet with Sophia. Sophia, who was wrongfully accused of being the mistress, flew into a rage when she understood the reason and retorted to Mia, "If it weren't for you stealing David away back then, David and I would have had a big family by now." In her anger, Mia took this as an admission of guilt from Sophia and slapped her, threatening to ruin her reputation. As a result, Sophia was fine, but Mia had a sudden heart attack that night and died. Sophia felt guilty and uneasy about it. She believed that her angry words had caused Mia's death, so she kept it from me and David, trying to atone for her actions. No wonder one day when Sophia came home, her face was flushed. It turned out she had been slapped by Mia. But now, she realized she was just a pawn in David's game. This morning, the police took David away from the hospital on suspicion of intentional murder. The diary that Mark had hidden in the crevice of his bed was also found by the police. The diary, with its crooked handwriting, read, "Today, Dad hit me because I discovered his secret with that woman. I had misunderstood Aunt Sophia. Mom wasn't killed by her. Mom, my stomach hurts so much. Am I going to die? Mark will come to find Mom soon. Dad tricked me into taking the medicine again. I like that medicine because every time I take it, I can see Mom. Mom, wait for me to come to you." The earlier entries in the diary all showed the various forms of mental abuse Mark suffered from David, with unbearable insults. Since Mark couldn't write the words, he used Pinyin instead. No wonder he was depressed. Robert, choking with emotion over the phone, recounted the contents of the diary. "Dr. James, thank you. Without you, the grievances of my sister and Mark would have forever remained in the dark." I sighed inwardly. Perhaps Mark's death on my operating table was meant to help me uncover the truth for him and his mother. The next day, Mia's company secretary committed suicide at home out of guilt. Her suicide note confessed her involvement with David in Mia's murder, including how they manipulated Mark, inducing him to run out of the house in the middle of the night while in a hallucinatory state. The car's sudden loss of control was also not a coincidence. And Sophia, she was their chosen shield, and I was the designated scapegoat. David thought his plan was flawless, but he didn't know that the net of justice is wide and spares none. Sophia was still squatting on the ground, crying. I didn't know whether to sympathize with her or call her foolish. I remembered that day when she met with Mia very clearly because she came home and cried in my arms for half the night. No matter how I comforted her, she wouldn't say why she was crying. 3 days later, she got drunk in a bar because she found out that Mia had a sudden heart attack and died at home after meeting with her. Even when she was drunk, she only said that she was having trouble with her case and needed to relax. Maybe at that time, her heart had already wavered. She didn't trust me, she was afraid that I would also suspect her of being David's mistress. But she didn't know that I had always been giving her a chance, which she failed to cherish. The end of this marriage could only be described as her own doing. Her surging tears could no longer arouse any sympathy from me. The secretary's suicide and suicide note, along with Mark's diary and the medical malpractice appraisal results, exposed a premeditated murder. Sophia, once an elite lawyer upholding justice, suddenly fell from grace and became an accomplice to evil. She finally felt the pain I had once suffered from online bullying, but she only cried and begged me, James, if I could do it all over again, I would stay far away from them. No, I would never have fallen in love with him in the first place. I would only love you. I got the answer I wanted, but it was too late. Sophia, there are no what ifs in this world. She fell to the ground in despair, flipping through the divorce agreement page by page, like a child who had lost everything. James, can you give me another chance? I was probably exhausted, and Sophia fainted at my feet. I felt uneasy. After taking her to the hospital, I inexplicably opened her phone. She had actually confessed to harboring the murderer David. The flood of insulting messages in her phone was even more humiliating than what I had received. I was innocent, so I ignored them completely, but Sophia, she replied to each one of those insults. She treated those insults as a way to atone for her sins, sincerely admitting her mistakes, and allowing strangers on the internet to attack her personally. She even replied to every single one of those unbearable messages. I didn't know what she was trying to do until the doctor told me, Dr. James, your wife is 2 months pregnant, and the situation is not good. I thought I had heard wrong. I took the test report, and the little person lying in Sophia's womb stabbed my heart and made it bleed. I sat down on the bench, feeling utterly helpless and realizing that my life was nothing but a joke. When Sophia was wheeled out, she was already awake. She looked at me with tearful eyes, James, our baby, the baby is back. I looked up at her and asked with difficulty, whose is it? As soon as the words left my mouth, the already pale face of Sophia lost all its color. James, this is our baby. Don't you want him? I gave a bitter smile. Was this child really mine? So what if it was? How could I love him? His existence would only remind me of the embarrassing and distrustful days between Sophia and me, just like our first child who had miscarried, a thorn that would forever be stuck in my heart. Sophia, we are getting divorced soon. Let's abort him while he is still just a tiny embryo. Sophia closed her eyes, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She looked as if she was about to shatter. He is the embodiment of our love, how could he be? She couldn't bring herself to say the rest, remembering her own words about our first child, who she had merely described as a clump of embryonic tissue. Fine, let's get divorced. Since she finally agreed, I directly drafted the divorce agreement at the hospital and had Sophia sign it. Seeing how eager I was to divorce her, her eyes were filled with nothing but sorrow and despair. I had never known that I could be so heartless towards Sophia. I had already prepaid the medical expenses. Since she was still in the early months, let's arrange the surgery in the next few days. My affairs are none of your concern. I am the mother, and I will decide whether he stays or goes. I couldn't understand the significance of her stubbornness and regret now. Why do people always realize the value of something only after they have lost it? Perhaps the child himself was sensible, knowing he had chosen the wrong parents. Before she was discharged from the hospital, Sophia had a threatened miscarriage. I went to see the child and took him away to be properly taken care of. The last connection between Sophia and me was completely severed. After the cooling-off period ended, at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Sophia had become very thin. James, can we really not go back? I pursed my lips tightly and walked straight into the service hall. As the steel seal was stamped down, a heart-wrenching love came to a complete end. I picked up my old dream again and went abroad for further studies. Later, I heard that Sophia defended Mark and Mia with all her might and brought David to justice. She often stood alone in front of a tombstone, staying there for the whole day. On a drizzling day, we passed each other by, no longer recognizing each other.